Hi, my name is Al Green. Not that one, but the struggling guy who was in the music industry for years trying to sell talent and songs to agents. The agents befriended me and taught me techniques that I want to pass on to you through my program, which is called You Can Talk, You Can Sell. Anyone who has ever taken this program has excelled in selling and either risen to the top of their company, their team, or the top of their field. It's called You Can Talk, You Can Sell, and you can get it right here. One of the questions that gets asked the most is very simple. It's, how do I get started working a new plan? In the course of the six-figure selling system, we talk about developing a plan and then starting the conversation and working your plan. It's a very simple thing. Simply put, what is covered is interviews and connections with people to learn what is every scenario that you might run into, because we're almost always surprised when we come into a scenario and we're not expected to know what to do. A great example is I had an appointment years ago with a company that did fire protection, and they had a huge sign on the top of the building. I mean, this must have been like a billboard size that named their company and said fire protection. And they had just moved into this facility. And due to the permits that had to be done in the city, they couldn't get the permits to install their own fire protection system. And ironically, I pulled up and I got out of my car to go inside. And at this point, two very large rigs came driving up, screeching their tires, and about 24 firemen jumped out and started heading into the building with hoses. And as it turned out, I wish I had had a camera. This huge building that said fire protection was on fire. Now at this point, I'm standing there like just a spectator, not knowing what to do, and watching these guys put out the fire. And all the employees, of course, are standing in the front of the building outside, and I had met a couple of them before, so I was there for an appointment, and I just basically said to the guy, okay, now what now, because we really can't proceed until this gets worked out, right? And he was like, oh yeah. I said, this is not a good situation. Really didn't know what to do. And the firemen were looking up at this huge sign that said fire protection as the building is burning, and they are laughing like crazy. Okay, how do you get yourself easily out of that one? Basically, what I did is I said, look, now is obviously not a good time. I'll check in with you in a couple of weeks. Okay, that was very, very interesting. Another situation is you pull up to a building because a lot of you are going to be doing business to business. I know I did business to business for many years, as well as one-on-one selling to residents. And you have an appointment, you walk up, and of course, unbeknownst to you, some event is happening. Like maybe there's an ambulance out front and they're taking somebody in a stretcher, and you have to go like be there to talk to somebody, and everybody's watching all this happening because it might not even be you. In fact, some offices are in the same building where they have the emergency and you're visiting a nearby office. So the fact is we're going to cover all of the scenarios, all of the type of objections, all of the type of people who are not business-minded. Now, I have talked about when you are in any kind of a social gathering, you make sure that what you're doing is letting people know who you are. I was at a party the other day with a very prominent businessman, and he walked around and talked to only the people he knew. I was waiting for him to approach me to at least introduce himself to me, because that would be the proper thing to do when you're trying to let everybody know everybody at this party could have been his client, but he stuck to his own circle. And I'm sitting there watching this guy who's supposed to be this enormous, successful business person, stick to his own group of people, which is okay if it's just a party like that, but he's supposed to be promoting his business, which was real estate, and I would have expected at least he'd go around to the table and introduce himself to most of the people there. And when he didn't, I kind of motioned a couple times to try to get into the conversation, and I really was not welcomed in. Well, what do you do in a situation like that? This is a guy who more probably would want to sell me than me sell to him. So what I did is I just let it go, and I know who he is, and I can always contact him. But one of the things I talk about that everybody has to be on the same page with me is that you have to be coachable. You've got to be willing to learn. If you have a guy who's a super successful guy, he might have an ego that's way up here, and he does not want to learn. He does not want to be told how to do things. He's got his own method, even though his method might not be the right formula. Those formulas don't always work. Years ago, I met a screenwriter who told me that he was going to redo the formula of Hollywood and get everybody on this new formula. Well, that's not how it works. They have formulas of how screenplays are laid out, and you can't break that formula because immediately you're an outsider and you're not going to change them until you're a bigwig on the inside. Same thing goes in business. Just because a person is super successful doesn't mean they can't learn anything. And if they think they know everything because they've been doing it longer, that's fine, let them. But you have to be a person yourself that you're going to work your own way, and you're not going to let your ego get in the way. You're going to work your ego into other people's egos, and you're going to find out how to make that blend. It's a very simple technique. And we cover every scenario, including the toughest ones. Especially the guy who's standing there with his arms, why should I buy from you? Okay? How do you overcome when a person says, look, I know you're selling a cheeseburger, for example, but you can get one anywhere. There's 15 places every city block. Why would I buy from you? Okay? If you're selling insurance, there are 1,000 insurance people in every zip code practically. Why would I buy from you? How come I can trust you more than I can trust the other people? Everybody claims they're trustworthy. This goes for people that sell software as well. The people who sell, especially the protection software. And they're one-on-one security consultants that say, oh, don't worry, we will never take your information. Well, how is it I signed up years ago for a very high-end security software and I got hacked into within a day? I mean, you know, you've got to understand that not everything you do is going to have the integrity that you think it's going to just because they say so. But you have to be a professional, and you have to have the integrity to make sure that your product delivers and that you have a complete understanding of it, so that when you deliver, you are making your name with a person. You're making an impression. And impressions is what gets us. We have impressions growing up. Anything traumatic that happens to you is an impression. Anything super exciting in your life is your impression. And it's going to probably blow your mind. But when you are working in sales, you have to have an impression where the people feel comfortable with you enough to talk to you. When you work on a scale of high-end super salesmen that teach others, people who taught me, you learn how to get to the point to where you can walk in and see a customer without an appointment and they will accept you and greet you. And if they're busy, they'll say, hey, could you come back in half an hour? But they do invite you back. It's all about finding all the different niches in all the different ways. You're not going to learn this by reading it in a book. You're not going to learn this by following all of the standard formula sales techniques there are, because things are different these days. People are going to talk about being online and having an online presence, which the last company I worked for wouldn't allow us to have an online presence. Believe it or not, we had to be in person. They wanted in-person selling. And so we learned how to excel at selling in person. But what we did is we found our own way to work. Some people like to start early in the morning, which is great. And there are people like me that found out 90% of the business I wrote was after 5 o'clock at night. And why was that? Because that's when people are home and they were free to talk, including a lot of the purchasing agents that work for companies. A lot of them said, no, I have to go home, I have to make dinner, I have to have dinner, whatever, that's fine. Feel free to call me if you want to, or I'll call you at work tomorrow, when's a good time? And again, following up, always ask when is a good time, and then continuing on to develop a rapport with that person. But you will learn as many different techniques as I can cover by getting people up that will talk to you about what they've run into, and then we're going to tackle how to handle that situation. Because when you're doing professional salesmanship, you have no idea what situation you're running into. So be prepared to handle any situation, and if it is an awkward situation, you'll probably know what to do with it. At the same time, when I was at that building that was on fire, I left quite amused and saddened, but it was ironic. It really was a very interesting thing that happened. But went on to my next client, and the next person I saw, I said, you're not going to believe what just happened. And I opened with this story. And ironically, that kind of sparked their interest, and they kind of started laughing. And next thing you know, we're having a completely different conversation, because that's what it's all about, is having that conversation. In the meantime, go forward, but always be prepared for anything.